Hello, welcome to Catholic Life, ordinary people with extraordinary faith. I'm Deacon Jody Moscona. Thank you for joining us today on Catholic Life. And today we're going to talk about New Orleans. We're going to talk about some of the history and some of the ways to find out about that history. I have an old friend of mine from the seminary, Steve Brown, joining me today. Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jody.
So it's been a while since the old school days. Huh?
Yes.
But I think you stayed on a little while.
I love education, and I audit, and I just go back for classes, and whenever I see a really good class, I'll take it.
Good for you, good for you. I'm kind of glad I finished, to be honest with you. It was kind of arduous back and forth. But Steve, since we were together, you now have a new venture, and I understand it's going really well. I'll tell you how this came about. One of our guy I interviewed on the show here, who's a media guy in Baton Rouge, Charles Barbour, who many of our folks watching know, went on your tour, and came back and was bragging all about it and saying, you got to get Steve to come talk about the tour. So here we are. So I'm glad to be able to do this. So tell me how this Crescent, Catholic Tours of the Crescent City, and why don't you throw out the website real quick for people?
CTCCNOLA.com.
Is there a phone number?
504-228-7662.
And we'll repeat that later. We'll try to put it on the screen for you also. So, how did this come about? Tell me a little bit about it.
I actually had a situation at work where I was not a very good situation, and I was very angry. And I went to one of my favorite places to pray, which is the Blessed Silos Shrine, and I prayed not to be angry. And while I was praying, I got this idea. God said, well, start a tour company. Catholic Tours of the Crescent City. And that's where I got my idea to start this company. I still had a year under contract, and we took that year. Actually, I had to drop Dr. Petrie's New Testament class.
Oh,
he
wow.
was finally doing on Tuesday evenings, so it was only an hour and a half instead of 8 hours a day. And went till Delgado, got my tour guide license, talked to the Archdiocese, got permission that they would, and then I, was able to go into the churches, and I found 5 or 6 churches that would be open. The Archdiocese was nice enough to, the seminary let me use the library to do my homework on the history of the churches and the Catholic history of the city, and put everything together. And in March of last year, I opened up Catholic Tours of the Crescent City.
Okay, so obviously you got the idea in a supernatural way, right, which we love around here, and it led you to all the stuff you just told us. But as a broad overview, tell the folks, if they go on the tour, what they're going to see.
I have 2 tours. I have a morning tour that's 3 hours. We start at Our Lady Guadalupe, which is at the outskirts of the French Quarter. Mm-hmm. It's on Conti and North Rampart. It was originally built in 1826 as a mortuary chapel. It's the oldest church structure in the city, still standing. It's the original foundation. From there, we go up to Immaculate Conception, which is a Jesuit church, and it has a beautiful history, and it can go on for hours of the history of that church.
We're going to talk about all these individually after, but just run through.
Then from there, we go up to Our Lady of Prompt Succor, and we talk about Our Lady of Prompt Succor and the Ursulines. Mm-hmm. From there, we drive down St. Charles Avenue, through the Garden District, through the Irish Channel, to St. Mary's Assumption, and the Shrine of Blessed Francis Xavier Silos. Right. We see the church and the Redemptorists, and then we drive over to St. Joseph's with the Vincentians, which is the largest Catholic church, I think, in the South. It originally sat 2,000 people. And then to St. Louis No. 2, and we visit the gravesite of Henriette de Lille. Nice. And we'll drop them back off at Our Lady Guadalupe. Usually I'll take a group back to their car, wherever they want to go. Right. Now, if I have a 1:30 tour, that tour goes from 10 to 1. And I offer an afternoon tour from 1:30 to 3:30. And it's the same tour, except we do not go to Our Lady of Prompt Succor, and that's because the cemeteries and churches close at 3. So I had to condense it, had to drop one of the sites. Then I also starting to do private. I have a bus tour. A woman took the tour from Fairhope and liked it so much they're coming next month with a busload of 40 people.
Nice.
And I have a group from Montgomery doing a 2-day pilgrimage, trying to expand into it. So we're going to do a Tuesday and a Wednesday and incorporate that. So we'll spend more time in each place.
A lot of options here for your business.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. So let's talk about these churches individually, just so we can get some people excited about it. First of all, I'm from New Orleans, so I know of what you talk, but I think you know a little bit more about it than me. Let's start with Our Lady Guadalupe. Let's talk about the church. You said it's the oldest church structure?
Oldest church structure. It was built in 1826 as the French mortuary chapel just to bury people with yellow fever. They were not quite sure what caused yellow fever. They thought it might be fumes from dead bodies. So they built a church on the outskirts of the city, and when people died of yellow fever, that's where they would have their services. It was against the law to have them in public places, i.e. St. Louis Cathedral. Mm-hmm. The worst year yellow fever was 1853. In 1853, anywhere from 9,000 to 11,000 people died of yellow fever that one year.
Wow.
There were lines with carriages with coffins, and the month of August was the worst, between 2 and 2.5 miles long every day. And then it closed at the Civil War. It opened, at some point, the name became St. Anthony's Mortuary Chapel, and then after the Civil War, it became St. Anthony Padua, and it was 2 years as a church for Confederate soldiers, and it closed again, and it reopened for the Italian immigrants. At one point, I didn't know 80% of the French Quarter were Italian immigrants.
Wow, that's interesting.
And they preferred St. Mary's in the old Ursuline convent. It closed down again, and then in the early 1900s, it was given to the Oblates of Mary, and the name was changed to Our Lady Guadalupe, and it's been open ever since.
That's awesome. So when people go on a tour of the church, obviously you give them some of the history, right, and they get to spend some time there. Does it incorporate prayer time?
We can, yes.
You can.
We try. It's hard to try to get to the 5 sites in a 3-hour period. So we can have small, or yes, I would say yes. I will never stop anybody from praying.
Right.
But we have about 15, 20 minutes per site.
So they got to get
prayers.
to it.
Right.
That's interesting. Wow, I didn't know all that about that church. That's interesting. I know about Immaculate Conception. That's the Jesuit Church on Baton Street.
But
right?
Did you know that it was built in 1857 when they sold a piece of property next to it? Well, originally, the Jesuits were given Bienville's plantation. And this plantation went from Canal Street to Poydras, from the river to the Superdome.
Really?
Now, when Spain took over the territory in 1763, the French kicked the Jesuits out before they gave up. The Jesuits were kicked out, so they lost all that property. Bishop Anton Blanc invited the Jesuits back in 1837. They came back, they bought 2 pieces of property, where the church stands now, and the Pierre Marquette Hotel was their school. And then in 1925, they opened up Jesuit High School and Loyola University. They sold that piece of property. When they were building the hotel, they were driving the pilings into the ground, and they cracked the foundation of the church. And they either had to demolish it, but they decided instead to take the church apart brick by brick, fix the foundation, rebuilt the church 90% originally, moved it out 10 feet. They have 4 extra stations of the cross. And I've heard some people say that's when they put the extra. They have the agony in the garden and the crowning with thorns, and they have the resurrection and ascension into heaven.
Wow.
4 extra stations. And their stations of the cross are in the stained glass windows.
That is awesome.
Their cast iron pews are from the Litany of Loreto, 7 different titles for Mary in the pews that you sit in. And those are from the original church.
Wow. So I've been in that church many times, never knew any of that history. This is just a phenomenal opportunity for people to get to know not just where the sites are and what they are, but to know a little bit of the history. This is pretty interesting. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a short break. We got 3 more to cover.
Okay.
And we'll be able to cover them, I'm sure, after we take a short break, okay?
Thank you.
You're watching Catholic Life, Ordinary People with Extraordinary Faith. We're talking about tours of some of the Catholic sites in the city of New Orleans. The company is called Catholic Tours of the Crescent City, LLC. We'll give you the website again. Why don't you give it to them real quick?
CTCCNOLA, Catholic Tours, the Crescent City, New Orleans, Louisiana, .com.
Great. So we're going to take a short break, and after the break, we'll be right back to talk more about the historic sites, Catholic-wise, in the city of New Orleans. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Here at St. Joseph Cathedral, we are famous for our organ music. We have 3 pipe organs here at the cathedral. The large one, which you see used on Sunday when you watch the TV Mass, but we also have 2 smaller ones. This one here is easier to show you, for example. I wish I could play, I don't. But I do know a few things about pipe organs. They're complicated. How to get music out of all of these pipes. Now, of course, they do easily make music, but that is a far cry from making the various pipes play in harmony with various chords, but it enhances the prayer and worship and aids the singing so much. Let's face it, who doesn't admit that music adds to their prayer? The organist who does play the organ here at the cathedral, Mr. Rabbi Jouar, is most accomplished. Not just playing the organ, but he's also mastered a talent that I think I have. He gets to ring the bell at the consecration of the Mass. Pretty complicated, don't you think? In any case, visit the cathedral. Come to us. Pray with us. Try to be an active member of the Diocese of Baton Rouge by discovering its mother church.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us through the break. This is Catholic Life, Ordinary People with Extraordinary Faith. Deacon Jody Moscona. Today we're talking about some historic sites in the city of New Orleans, Catholic historic sites. I'm joined once again by Steve Brown, an old friend of mine from Notre Dame Seminary. We went to school together, and he is now the tour guide and the owner of Catholic Tours of the Crescent City, LLC. And now we can go back to some of the churches. During the break, you were telling me more and more about Immaculate Conception. I don't know that we have enough time to talk about it all, but quickly talk about the statue that we were talking about.
The statue of Immaculate Conception of Mary above the high altar was originally commissioned for one of the monarchs of France, the last queen, Queen Marie Amélie, for her private chapel. The French Revolution of 1848, they overthrew the French monarchy. The sculpture wasn't fully completed. Somebody bought the statue from the sculptor, he finished it, they donated the statue to the Jesuits. It's Our Lady of Immaculate Conception. They knew they were building the church, so they shipped it from France to here, and it's been in the church ever since.
That's awesome. So many stories like that that you just don't know about that are forming the history of a lot of the Catholic sites in New Orleans. So let's talk about Prompt Succor.
So then from there we go up to Our Lady of Prompt Succor. Now the Ursuline nuns have such a big part of the history of the city of New Orleans. They first came to the city of New Orleans in 1728 at the request of the King of France to run a royal hospital. They said, okay, if two conditions. One, you build us a convent, and two, you let us to educate young girls. In the 1720s, that was very unusual to educate anybody other than the royal class.
Right.
They opened their school up and they started to teach the French settlers, the Native American Indian girls, the African American girls, the Spanish girls. Any young woman showed up, they taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and theology at no cost. And if you wanted to learn how to sew or to cook, play music, there was a fee. And for a while in our history, there were more educated women or literate women than men because of the sisters.
That's interesting.
They also have a very big part in the Battle of New Orleans. January 8th is the feast day of Our Lady of Prompt Succor, who's the patron saint of the city of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. And her statue is in the shrine of Our Lady of Prompt Succor, which is their third location. They're up on State Street. They were first in the French Quarter, then they were downriver, and now they are where they are, and they're still educating.
That's very interesting.
Almost 300 years later.
Wow. Now, the convent that the sisters have, that's a different place, right?
The old Ursuline convent is in the French Quarter.
Right.
The original property used to be 6 square blocks.
Right.
There was a lot of uncertainty after the Louisiana Purchase. Prior to that, under the French and then the Spanish, the crown owned the churches.
Right.
So now who owned their convent? Actually, they have a letter in the museum signed by Thomas Jefferson saying that he acknowledges the good work that the sisters have done and would hope they would stay and continue to educate, and that there was their property. But as the French Quarter grew, Charter Street went right through the middle of their convent.
Right.
So they had to move. They sold it and moved. They moved downriver, and we built another Mr. Go. The industrial canal went right through their property again.
Right.
So they sold it, and they were in their present location on State Street since about 1915.
Right. Interesting. Interesting. So, Assumption Church, now that's where Silos is,
Correct.
right? And that's a Redemptorist
Correct.
church. Was it ever part of the Redemptorist high school in
Yes.
those days? That's what I thought.
That's a very unusual parish, very unique parish. There is the first church they built, St. Alphonsus. It's St. Alphonsus Parish, and the first church was St. Alphonsus Church. That's an Irish church. And the day they finished building it, they went across the street, laid the cornerstone for the German church. And then they built Our Lady of Bon Secours. So they had a French church, a German church, and an Irish church, all within 3 blocks of each other. Each had their own schools. Bishop Anton Blanc thought it was very important for the immigrants coming into the city to be able to worship and go to school with their native language. And so that's why, and it's unusual that the Redemptorists run all 3.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Now, one of the very famous Redemptorists in our city is Blessed Francis Xavier Silos. He was only in the city for about 12 to 14 months, but had a big, big impact. And he's has his shrine there. And they also have a reliquary that's it takes my breath every time I go in there. They have a relic, a strand from the robe, the purple robe from the Passion of Christ in their reliquary.
Wow.
Most people don't know that. They just redid their whole reliquary. But you walk in there and you read, and they have the documentation from the Vatican. The Passion of Christ, they have a strand from that purple robe.
Wow.
So that's just a beautiful
Powerful
stop.
place.
Very, very powerful. And there's usually healers there, and that's usually where we stop and pray. But even at the Our Lady of Prompt Succor, they have Bishop de Burgh's left his relics from the catacomb of Priscilla, and they have large bones. I mean, we see relics and they're little tiny they have big pieces of bones. They're on the altar, and during the tour we're able to go behind the altar. And
So Priscilla, who was with Paul, right? That Priscilla?
I think so. I'm not.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
So.
Wow, see, stay on this show and you learn a lot of interesting things, even if it is in New Orleans. So let me just, we'll just comment very briefly about Silos. He's under consideration for canonization at this point. And that's just wonderful. And I know that we have a relic here in Baton Rouge from him that we do a healing mass at the cathedral. I think it's monthly, I'm not sure, but that's, we're tied into that.
Yes.
That whole.
Well, I mean, he's very big in the whole city. I mean, it's we're all in the same archdiocese, and it's the state of Louisiana.
Right.
I'm surprised that we're still, we have the shrine here.
Right.
He was the rector in Baltimore for the Redemptorist Seminary.
Right.
They actually wanted him to become Bishop of Pittsburgh.
Wow,
and
really?
he said no, he wanted to be a missionary priest. And I think he lived in 16 places before he came to New Orleans. And then he's been buried in 6 different places after he died. He was off the altar, then on the altar. The church suffered a lot of damage after Hurricane Betsy. They went across the street to St. Alphonsus. And then when they rebuilt St. Mary's Assumption, he came back over. Then he was beatified in 2000, so Rome came, exhumed his body, and then he went over to Rome, and now he's in a reliquary. So he was moved around a lot.
Wow, that's interesting.
So,
interesting. You know, you talked about the churches being so close together. There are other places that are like that. I was actually in Memphis for a conference, and I went to the Catholic Church, and the pastor pulled me out. He says, "Look down the street." And you look on one side a block away, on the other side another block, and on the other side it says there we have the different churches, you know, the German, the French, and the Irish.
And I didn't
churches.
understand that at first. I are we that prejudiced? But it wasn't. Once I started to do my research, it was accommodating. It didn't do an Irish immigrant or a German immigrant to come off the boat and not speak the language. They needed to go to a church where they could understand the homilies and the sermons. I mean, the Mass was said in Latin, but the homilies and the Gospel and the homilies is in their native language, and they had schools so they could assimilate into America.
Culture. Right, that's pretty interesting. That is just wonderful. Let's talk about St. Joseph for a minute. Now, is this the St. Joseph on Tulane?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm very familiar because, I'll tell you why, this is just a side. Behind there is a large parking lot, and you can rent a spot for the Saints games in the parking lot. So we parked in there a lot for many, many, many years.
Well, they also have the church itself is a beautiful structure. It's huge. It's 4.4 million bricks in the church itself.
Wow.
It's 200 feet long, 100 feet wide. When they first built it, they really struggled to get it. They actually took 21 years to build it. It was run by the St. Vincent DePaul Society. The Daughters of Charity with the nuns that ran Charity Hospital. Their first church was across the street from Charity Hospital. They realized the population was growing, so they bought the property where it is now.
Which is around the corner
Around
from
the
old
corner,
Charity. Yeah.
correct. And it took 21 years to build. They put the walls up, and they noticed the walls were shifting. So it wasn't until they could figure out a way to stabilize the walls could they open the church. They figured out a cable system. If you go in the church and you look at the ceiling, you see these cables running through. They have 90 stained glass windows, 5,000 square feet of stained glass.
Wow.
It's absolutely beautiful. And they're all done by the Emerald Fry Company. They're out of St. Louis. Just stunning detail. But behind that, where you go park, they have the Rebuild Center. And that is just such a gift for the homeless. They get hot meals Monday through Friday. They're able to take showers. They're able to do laundry. Depending on the day of the week, they can get haircuts. Doctors come in for medical services, psychologists. They're able to help find identity, go through the legal process if they, it's a really strong, and it's interdenominational. So other faiths will come.
And it's run by the Oblates, no?
For St. Vincent de Paul.
St. Vincent DePaul, okay. Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing how giving and how generous that church and what it does for the community.
Now that's the one with the big steps that go all the way up from the outside, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too. It's funny if you look at the base when you get to when you first walk into the church in the base, the architect put his family members in the base of the wall. So you see, and I always joke, I said, well, this way mom and dad know you came to church, because you walk in and there's a mom and dad, a male and a female looking at you
Right.
coming out of the church.
So look, we got a few more minutes. Let's talk about the tours.
But one more,
Go ahead.
St. Louis number 2.
Oh, yeah.
We visit the gravesite of Henriette DeLille. Now, Henriette DeLille will be the first African-American, American-born saint in the Catholic Church. She started the Sisters of the Holy Family. She's been venerated. They've been to her grave, and Rome has, last year, removed some of her remains to make relics. So that means she's pretty close to becoming a blessed.
Wow.
And it also explained why we bury above ground, the whole Spanish tradition. So
Right.
that's the end of the tour. That's a 3-hour tour.
So that is awesome. That is just so fantastic. So I hope you get the sense from our conversation here, which is very conversationally, about the rich historic heritage of our Catholic faith in the city of New Orleans. And it's just an hour down the road, and you can go take the tour. Do they sign up for it online?
You go online, sign up. I'll do it for one person. I can do up to 6. And then if bigger groups, we can accommodate. I have a Honda Odyssey, and I do the tour. 6 people, I can squeeze in 7, but it's a little tight. Or if we go bigger than that,
And if somebody wants to come with a bus, you'll
get on the
give
bus
the tour,
get on the bus. Yeah, actually, I have, like I said, next week, Fairhope, 40 people.
That's fantastic.
They took the tour, liked it so much, went back to their parish.
That is fantastic. Maybe we should get some parishes around here to come down and sign up for
One
it.
of the things I go step by step. I want to do what I do well before I go to the next step, is trying to figure out how to get the parishes, the RCA groups in the city to come and learn, and anywhere just to learn the history of the Catholic history, and also some of the school and alumni associations.
Fantastic. Give us the website one more time.
ctccnola.com.
So it's Catholic Tours CC,
Crescent City.
Crescent City, CCCC.
Right, CTCCNOLA, Catholic
Right.
Tour. I try to get CTCC, and that's like the Chinese touring car club or something like that. So I had to add NOLA.
Okay, and we'll put it on the screen.
Okay.
So we're going to have to wrap up here. This has been phenomenal, Steve.
Well,
I
thank
wanna
you for
thank
the
so
opportunity
much
to
for
come,
coming.
and great to see you also, Jody.
Yeah, it's been great. And I really encourage everybody, if you have any sense of history, because Baton Rouge was part of the Archdiocese of New Orleans up until the early 60s. And so our history is their
Right.
history, and we share it. So, Steve, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
You've been watching Catholic Life, Ordinary People with Extraordinary Faith. Thank you for watching. We hope you take advantage of the information you got today and maybe get a little bit deeper into your Catholic faith. Till next time, God bless.